this episode of Peephole Pictures, we're going to be looking at Roommates from 1982.
I'm Joan Hartman. I just moved in yesterday. You know, our fields aren't really that far apart. I'm an actress.
Whoever you are, I've always depended on the kindness of strangers.
Bravo! Bravissima!
What's bothering you? Nothing's bothering me. Come on, Sherry, we know better. If you haven't guessed by now, I was a hooker.
You motherfucker.
You're taking me.
Don't worry about it.
Here's to both of you. May you pay your rent on the first.
You can't see it right now, but I have a fresh, hot cup of coffee right here, and it's just perfect. Just perfect, man. Warms the soul like no other, man. You have a long day, you're tired, and you're like, my gosh, man, I gotta have a nice cup of that, Joe. Well, there you go. We're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about Roommates from 1982. Written and directed by Chuck Vincent, co-written by Rick Marx. This is a film that's often cited as one of the strongest from the golden age of porn. And it's got a knockout cast to go along with it. We have their three leads here, Samantha Fox, Veronica Hart, and Kelly Nichols. But along them, we have just a great male cast. We have Bobby Astor, Jack Wrangler, Jerry Butler, Ron Jeremy, and Jamie Gillis, just to name a few. This is a film that was put out recently by Quality X. So before we actually get into it, we can talk about the release itself for a little bit. This thing is loaded, man. I mean, they really spared no expense when it came to giving this film the treatment it rightfully deserves. It comes in a nice hard box. I don't know if you can hear this or not, but yep, there it is. Very sturdy. We have the Blu-ray in a nice slipcover with different artwork than on the front. We also have a booklet as well with two essays, one by Rick Marx himself and the other by, I want to get the name here because both essays are very, very well written. I had the pleasure of reading some of Rick's writings, and he's a very, very well written man. And the other person I want to name is Casey Scott. So it's a nice booklet here, get it all together, and I'll talk about the features in a little bit, but on the inside as well, we also get a nice poster and two songs from the soundtrack, With You and For Everything You Are, and I believe these are the two songs they used for the music videos that are one of the features on here. I don't entirely remember. But anyways, Roommates. We have our three characters here. Billy, played by Samantha Fox, Joan, played by Veronica Hart, and Sherry, played by Kelly Nichols. Sherry and Joan, they move in with Billy, and the three of them are trying to make their way in this world. You know, they're dealing with the environment around them, but more specifically the men around them in their lives, some of which are kinder to them than others, but ultimately they're trying to make their way in the world and become their own independent women. And we follow the plights of these characters throughout the film. And it's interesting with a film like this because you have three great leads here. You would think that, and with a great cast as well. I mean, I don't know if you haven't mentioned, like, Gloria Leonard is not. She's in the film as well, and it's solid, man. But you would initially think that it would have some issues kind of balancing all the characters, but one of the strongest things the film does is that it's able to really balance all three of the plights of these characters. We have Billy, who is being taken advantage of by Marv, played by Bobby Astor, who, interestingly enough, in real life, actually, Samantha Fox and if I say Barbie Astor, Samantha Fox and Bobby Astor were involved with each other at this point. And Samantha Fox actually took care of Bobby and up until his death in 2002. They were neighbors as well and really cared for one another. I should also say as well, we have Larry Ravine doing the cinematography, and that's one of the things that I'll mention later. But the strongest aspects of this film come right at the forefront. You have a strong direction, a strong script, and strong performances across the board. There's nobody in the film that harbors it down or brings it down, and it'd be enough for one thing for these actors to get by, because oftentimes you would go, okay, well, that was a good performance, for what it was, but the script gives the appropriate time for Samantha, Kelly, and Veronica to really have their moments to shine, to really show just how strong of actresses they really were. And I think in part that helps because when you see how Chuck directs and writes a lot of these actresses, you really get a sense of how much he really cares for them and how much he knows them. I was, in one of the interviews on the disc, talking to Rick Marx, he had mentioned that Chuck had been more familiar with these actresses. So a lot of the stronger sort of character stuff I kind of got more from Chuck in terms of he knew not just actors and actresses that would be right for these roles, but more so their own involvement in their own history as well. So we have like Kelly Nichols in the film, who is, she's trying to be a model, but I forgot if she was trying to be, she was trying to be a model, I apologize. But she's having a bad stint with drugs. I mean, she's getting messed up on drugs, and because of that, she's getting taken advantage of. And then you find out in real life, Kelly Nichols really did have a stint with drugs, was having problems with it. And Jamie Gillis in the film was playing this sort of deviant character who at first you're kind of unsure of what he's really about. I mean, he stops something brutal happening, but then you're like, what is he doing with this? And that plays to Jamie Gillis's, the kinds of characters that he would play, when he was playing these more kind of sleazier, deviant characters. Because even, I'm thinking of a film like High Rise or something like that. And in that film as well, at first it's like, oh, he's playing it more kind of funny. His introduction to that film, he's lying on this couch, he's like reading this ridiculous kind of dialogue, and then, pretty soon it starts to get like, oh, what's going on here, man? And but still, and you have Ron Jeremy in the film, who's playing kind of like a goofball and all that. All the performances in this film really kind of strongly suit. Not just solely a personal connection to these actresses and actors, but what they would be the strongest at. Samantha Fox is one of the. I think Samantha Fox especially has always been one of my favorite adult actresses. I mean, she had worked with Jack Wrangler as well for the first time. I think that was, I don't know if that was Jack's first film with Chuck, but her first film with Chuck was Jack and Jill, also known as Jack plus Jill, from 1979, and that's more of an overt comedy. But even at the beginning of the film, her and Jack have this really ridiculous kind of sex scene in their apartment, but you can just tell kind of the comfortability there. They're saying this really wild dialogue, but you can tell they're having fun with it, and that translates through here. You feel a real comfortability in them. There's because there's a moment in the film when Samantha Fox starts getting involved with Sherry, Billy and Jim, played by Jack Wrangler. They start getting involved, and they have they're starting getting dressed, and Jim goes like, first want to take their clothes off, gets their navels kissed from the bottom, and so they're kind of like playing around and goofing, and it's one thing for a director to be like, all right, just act like you're having a good time, but it's another thing where when you're watching it, you're like, wow, I really get a sense of charisma and comfortability, and especially when it comes through to Samantha, Veronica, and Kelly. The way these three women interact feels so natural, and when you watch the special features and listen to them, Samantha Fox unfortunately is no longer with us. She passed away a couple years ago, and I know towards the end of her adult career there was, she kind of strayed away from the adult film business for, various issues. But the way that Nichols and Veronica Hart, in talking about the film, go back and forth is such a pleasure to listen to. I would highly recommend that even if you've already seen this film, to listen to the commentary on this film, because it reminds me of like when Kurt Russell and John Carpenter talk about, when you listen to their commentaries on like Big Trouble in Little China or Escape from New York, especially Escape from New York. I mean, they're just constantly laughing, constantly talking about, remember when we were doing this, remember when we were doing that, and I like informative documentary. I like informative commentaries as well. Commentaries from like academics or people who can give more context into the film. I mean, I think like Joe Bob Briggs, anytime he does a commentary on a film, I mean, you're guaranteed you're gonna find out some new stuff you didn't know before. Actually, one of my favorite commentaries in any film is his for the Anchor Bay Blu-ray of I Spit on Your Grave. But in the commentary here and in their interview, they have such fond memories, and they're joking around. Even some things, like there's a part where Veronica Hart goes into a kitchen, and there's like a funny joke. She's like, it must not be a very busy restaurant. There's no one in the kitchen. And I was like, you know what? I hadn't even thought of that when I was watching the film. Like, yeah, man, where is everyone, As well as all three actresses are given their own unique moment to shine. One of the things I notice when it comes to a strong writer and a strong director with these adult films are these elongated sequences of dialogue that aren't cut. Like, I was recently writing a piece about Andy Milligan's Flesh Pot on 42nd Street, and there's one moment in that film where the camera work is not totally there, but Harry Reams and Laura Cannon have a long dialogue back and forth that doesn't feel improvised. It feels like an actual back and forth, but they're such strong performers, they can deliver this dialogue confidently that never feels like just going through the motions. And that's how it is here. Like early on, there's a part where Samantha Fox is talking to both Veronica and Kelly about her past and where she came from. And it's like such an emotional moment, man. I mean, you really just kind of feel for her, and you really get the sense that she wants to really do something with her life. She doesn't just want to go back into this lifestyle. And then when things start to change, you get a real sense of confliction with this character, and as well as one of the strongest sequences in the film, which it just killed me when I watched it both times. I've seen this film twice now, I should say. Is so Veronica Hart in the film, she's doing this play with Jerry Butler, and and they have a nice back and forth. They have a nice repertoire. Jerry Butler's character Eddie is gay, so she kind of wants to, she's looking for something, but she also understands, and he's kind of conflicted about it too. But there's a moment in the kitchen scene, actually, I was talking about before, where she just breaks down to him, and she just is crying in his arms. And like, even just thinking about it now, I wish you could see the hairs on my arms standing, because just thinking about it and her cries to him of just, I don't want to give away what the specificities are, but it's that, what's the word I'm looking for? You watch these, and Kelly Nichols as well, I should say. There's a great part on a rooftop where she's getting upset with Samantha Fox, and she's lashing out at her, and you're watching these women, and you know that Chuck trusts them. You know what he's writing, and as well with Rick Marx, who I gotta say, I want to mention him as well, and I have to give a shout out to Mike White from the Projection Booth podcast. It's a terrific podcast in its own right. And there's a fantastic episode with him and Ashley West and the woman whose name I do apologize, I don't have up right now. But they talk about roommates and some films adjacent to roommates. But I reached out to him because I had some questions about the script, and he was kind enough to point me in the right direction. And so Rick, RJ Marks now, he was kind enough to answer my questions. He was a true gentleman. He was kind enough to send script pages over so I could read, because that's another thing I want to talk about as well, is how the love sequences in the film are written. I can't say just enough kind things about him. He's just a true gentleman. I didn't want to take up too much of his time. I'm sure he's busy with other things. I'm sure I don't want to be that guy who's fanboying over this. But I mean, just what a total gentleman, and I'm so thankful of him for answering my questions, because the way that the sex sequences are written in this film, and which is something that he brings up as well in the interview on the disc, is that it's not just they go to bed and the climax is on their chest or something like that, whatever. It's more than that. And actually, I want to pull this up here because I want to actually read one of the things that he sent over. And here we go. So this is a sequence between Samantha Fox and Jack Wrangler, and I want to read some of this. This is going to be a little adult, so I try to be kind of PG-13 with it. This is a little descriptive, so if you want to skip this, that's just your heads up now. But he says, he starts kissing her lips, down her body. Slowly, he reaches her navel and below. He kisses her pussy, etc. During sex, they completely enjoy each other. They're vivacious and good-humored. When they start to fuck, the bed squeaks loudly. Billy, quiet. Jim, I'll try. They suppress their laughter as they continue to screw. They near orgasm, stifling their cries. After resting together for a long moment, a door is heard opening. Both Jim and Billy become alert. It's just, I mean, that right there could have been written, Billy and Jim, they have sex. That could have been that. I haven't looked at enough adult scripts to really make any sort of comparison's sake, but even something like that, I mean, just the emotion in that alone. I mean, just their laughter, they're going on with it. And that sequence as well, Larry Ravine worked on this film as well. He was a cinematographer on this, and so I'm gonna sip this right here. He was the director of photography. I'm sorry. And the way that some of these sequences are shot are so uniquely their own. That's why I think of, a film I'll compare it to a little bit later in terms of just things that it reminded me of, but a film as well that I think is really well directed in its own right is Roger Watkins' Her Name Was Lisa, which also has Samantha Fox, and it actually kind of follows a similar sort of thing about this character who is trying to make it in the business, but then that's a far more not totally mean-spirited, but it's not it's going for a more nihilistic direction than this is. But so like that whole sequence between Samantha Fox and Jack Wrangler, I had a brain fart there for a second. They're joking around, they're laughing and all this and that, and the way that it's shot, there's like these great POV shots where we're looking down at Jack and he's like looking up at Samantha, and it's just so emotional and tender and intimate. I mean, you see so many adult films where they're just so flatly shot, where it's just like, okay, as long as they're in frame, that's all that matters, that's all it really is. And this isn't that. This is a film that's far more concerned with the characters and the writing than it is the sex itself. Because, the sex is there, but even as well, there's hardly any money shots in the film. I think there's 2 from what I can remember. And they're not exactly romantic, man. They're not exactly erotic. I mean, one of which is like one of the uglier scenes in the film. And actually, that's one that I want to mention before, and one of the main things I wanted to ask RJ about is that when it comes to these actors being written, or these characters, being written in a way for these actors, Jamie Gillis has a sequence in this film where he's hovering over Kelly Nichols. She's passed out. She's on drugs and everything like that. And he's saying this dialogue that's very repetitive, and it's sort of like, it was reminding me of recently when I read the book Pure Filth, which I've mentioned on the Cozy Corner of Cinema before a couple times. Primarily written by Jamie Gillis, but has some co-writing by Peter Sotos as well. But that's transcripts of a couple of Jamie Gillis's later sort of voyeuristic work, like On the Prowl and Walking Toilet Bowl. And when he's left to his improvisation, you get a lot of like repeated dialogue from him. He's like, yeah, you say stuff like, yeah, you're a pretty girl, huh? You're a pretty girl, yeah, pretty little girl, He'll say stuff like that. So I'm watching this film and I'm like, this is so Jamie. This has to be improvised, right? And actually, even on the commentary, Kelly Nichols says that it was improvised. Now I had asked the question before I listened to the commentary, but I wanted to make sure with RJ. I'm like, how much of this sequence was improvised? And he says it wasn't. It was verbatim. So I asked him, could I see the page? Because I was curious I was thinking like, well, maybe some of it was improvised, maybe some of it wasn't. And RJ, being the gentleman that he is, I should say, he was kind enough to send me the script, and send me that page in particular, and I'm reading it, and I'm like, no, that's verbatim, man. That's a Jamie thing right there. It's perfect for that. He's so natural in the way, and that comes back to what I was talking about before, is Chuck's confidence. Chuck and Rick's confidence in the performers as well. It's just so fantastic, man. And also, I mean, I'm talking about a lot of the drama in this, but there is comedy in this film as well. One of my favorite sequences in the film is we have a montage sequence with Veronica Hart. She's going through these different auditions, and it's great because the way that's edited together is so funny, but realistic. I imagine that a lot of like I'm thinking of something far more mainstream and big. But you look at something like La La Land, or you have that whole part in the film where Emma Stone is like going to these auditions. Emma Stone's character's going to these auditions, like. But in this film, they're like, oh, how old are you? I'm this age. Oh, we need somebody younger. And then she goes, next interview and lies. Oh, I'm this age. Oh, we need somebody younger. Oh, can you dance? No, I can't. We need somebody who can dance. And the next, I can dance. We don't need anybody who can dance, And that's great. It's tragic, but it's funny. But then you also have another part as well. They're trying to get like this cat to like, to do this thing on camera, and they're trying to like push it, and it's funny and all that. And actually, one of the observations that I can't take credit for, but because I heard it on the Projection Booth podcast, and I thought was just such an interesting point, however intentional or not. It was sort of just like, they're making this cat, kind of like, eventually it sort of succumbs to their whims and eventually does what they want. They're all like, yeah, finally. And, that can be a metaphor for these women just sort of like being pushed. And it's like, how far are you willing to go until eventually you're just going to do what they want. As well as the way, this is a film that, it's funny, when I was, the last episode I was talking about the erotic memoirs of a male chauvinist pig. And I mentioned how in that film, it's primarily all the same kind of interiors. There's a couple bedroom shots, or bedroom sets, I should say. And I mean, there's like one part at the end where he's outside, but this film here has a wider range of sets and locations. So you have a lot of interiors. You have there's like a sequence in the back of a taxi. There's one part where they're shooting a fake commercial, and actually the location they're shooting outside I'm blanking on the name of the place it was, but that was a place where they shot a lot of stuff. They went out there and they did that building. They shot a lot of stuff in. But then even like, when you have like these interiors, like there's an early sequence when, Kelly Nichols is at this club with Ron Hudd, and it's like this really hallucinogenic sequence, and it becomes almost like nightmarish in a way, where they're having sex and the moans of pleasure almost start to like turn into like cries of horror, and it's like unsettling. It's like, my gosh, man, what's going on? And then in the morning, it hits back to the reality of it. Ron Hudd's basically just like, get out of here, man. I don't, you're just disposable to me. And it's sort of like the way that they go about these characters and their mistreatment. It would have been far easier for the film to be much more mean-spirited than that. But Chuck and RJ, or Chuck and Rick, they have far too much respect for these characters. Even when there's some violence in the film, there's one sequence in particular where a character is being attacked by multiple men. The camera decides to, or whether it was Larry or Chuck, the camera decides to stay from a distance. We don't see anything. We don't see any of the violence happening, but we're hearing this horrific dialogue from these men who I won't get into it. Lacey, film for yourself, but you're like, it would be very easy to kind of indulge in that. And that's for a different kind of film, that's its own thing. But even as well, later in the film, there's another attack scene where a character is just beating on another character, and it's basically all off screen. We see the aftermath of it, and I think that's far more disturbing than if we actually saw it on screen. Because if the choreography of that kind of violence isn't directed the best, then you get kind of I think the impact kind of hurts more. I've seen films where they want to show the brutality of violence on screen, but then the choreography is like really awkward. There was one film I saw, and I won't give away the name of the film because I don't want to dog on it. Actually, it was a film I'm a big fan of. Actually, I'm not even dogging on it. Actually, if I'm a fan of it, then why wouldn't I say it? But I'm thinking of like Lynn Ramsey's You Were Never Really Here, and the main character in that film, Mike Confucius' character, he gets these guys, he hits them with hammers, but there's one part in that film I never forgot where he goes to hit, he beats a character with a hammer, but he's not even, but the actor, the fake hammer's not even close to the guy, and I'm like, man, if you just didn't show that, that impact would have been so much worse if you just saw like his like bashed head or something like that, And I think that was such a smart move to just not indulge in that. And truthfully, I don't really have a whole lot of issues with the film as is. I mean, there are some technical issues there. There's a boom mic here and there. And actually, it's funny. There's one part early on where they're talking in the apartment, and there's like a guy on the couch. I don't know who that was, but he's like half in frame. And I'm like, brother, I don't think he's supposed to be there. But then again, they were probably thinking this is gonna run in theaters, no one's gonna notice this sort of thing, and then now all these years later, we can see it in nice crystal clear, HD. If I had any real problems with the film, I would say maybe the Jamie Gillis and Kelly Nichols stuff is a little underdeveloped. I would say, because Jamie is kind of like domineering over her. Like there's a great part in a restaurant where he's basically like sexually manipulating her, and it's like it's a gross sequence. But I did think it was a little quick to get there. I would have liked a little bit more of how he's manipulating her. And you could say that she's on drugs and he's like maybe feeding her that, and that's totally fine. But that's like really a minor, I can't even call it a complaint because it's not distracting. It was just one of these things where as I was going along, I was just like, oh, this is kind of rushing it a little fast. But I mean, some technical stuff here and there. I mean, like when Samantha Fox and Jack Wrangler, they're in a taxi, and in the next sequence, they're in the bedroom, but you can see that it's clearly daytime out. They put a curtain in front of it, but they're right in front of the curtain, man. I'm like, you can't hide that. An interesting comparison as well, which I also asked RJ about, was whether it was an intentional comparison to something like Valley of the Dolls. Because you have that film, three characters as well, three women who are trying to make it, and they're varying degrees of success and failure. And actually, you even have one character in that film who ends up going to Europe to do adult films. There's actually a funny little joke about nod to that in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And I asked him about that, and he said that they knew about it, but that wasn't direct. That wasn't a direct sort of influence. The direct influence, at least from Rick's point of view, was the film from from 1959 called The Best of Everything. And he cites this film as kind of like a catalyst for this film. And that film itself is also very good in its own right. I had actually not heard of that film previously. And it does play of a dark melodrama, but I think for 1959, especially at that time, if you guys listen to my favorite films of 1958, one of the common themes that I had with a lot of those films coming out is that they're dealing with more adult themes in an adult way. And I look at that more interestingly than something like the 60s, kind of like sex comedies, where they're kind of like, well, now we can be a little risque, but it can't be too risque. I think of films like, Sex and the Single Girl, where it's like, we're going to be risque, but we're not going to go too far. It's like, yeah, we can't, it's like, can't step on too many eggshells. But then a film like The Best of Everything, or a film that made like my list, Man of the West or Separate Tables, are dealing with more adult themes, like Man of the West is dealing with some sexual assault. Separate Tables is dealing with characters just talking about having sex, and it's such an interesting kind of transitional period into the 60s, kind of getting, not fully out of the Hays Code at that point, but starting to get away from that. So it's an interesting comparison. Actually, I think I forgot where I heard it, but I think I read or heard from someone that Chuck was partly inspired by the film Ordinary People, which I have also seen as well, which, The Best of Everything is an easier kind of tie-in to Roommates than Ordinary People. I've seen Ordinary People as well, but I forgot where I read that, so I can't exactly make any real kind of direct comparison. Also as well, this film was partially, it's sort of like a soft remake that came out not long after, actually. I want to get the year here, actually. I think it may have been the next year. Yeah, there was another film, Little Girls Lost, from 1983, which also had Veronica Hart and Ron Jeremy back in it. This film was directed by Ted Roeder. It's Roeder. And that was a tricky film to find. I had to really search for that. And, that's an interesting enough film in its own right, but I think the fact that it's kind of tied to Roommates, and it doesn't totally play out like that, it does do its own thing, but that's a far less interesting film. I think the characters in this film and the character complexities are really what make this, or part of the reason why this film works so strongly. And actually, I think I said earlier that Samantha Fox's first film was Jack and Jill. I think it actually was Bad Penny from 1978. Although I may be wrong about that too. I'm not exactly sure. I'm not claiming to be an expert or anything like that. I'm just talking about more so in the context of all three of these performers working with Chuck at one point. And it's interesting when this came out here, and kind of, this did get mainstream attention. This was reviewed in Variety, but at the same time there was sort of almost a backlash in a way, because the sex in this film is so complementary to the story, and it's not totally there to titillate. A lot of the, some of the sex in the film, especially like, at the end, there's like a scene with Samantha Fox and Bobby Astor, which is, there's not a money shot. It's not there to amuse you. It's this character in this situation, and then how she gets back at him is good. It's a nice way to kind of like end. And she also has a really great scene with him after the fact, where she really kind of like snaps at him. But from what I heard, there was some backlash about the sex in the film, and how it wasn't what audiences kind of were expecting, and in some cases even wanted, because it's not a film that you walk out and you're feeling like titillated, or you're feeling turned on. You're feeling more for the characters and more kind of sad in a way. I forgot if it was Veronica or Kelly. One of them told a story a couple times about she had some friends who were lesbians who wanted a film of hers to watch. I forgot if she recommended it or they found it on their own. I apologize, but they watched that film and they said it was not sexy. But in terms of the golden age, these films breaking out into the mainstream, I think this is one of the more likely cases where it could have been, because there was also a softcore version of this, and which I believe was sold to the Playboy Channel, and an R-rated version, which I'm less familiar with that version. I actually had a little bit of trouble finding that. I didn't do enough research into that, because it's interesting when Chuck was saying that he thinks that the money shots would have cheapened it, and I do agree, because when you're looking for that with these characters, it's like it almost feels obligatory to have it there, but because the only times that really happens is not in the most ideal situations. It's interesting to kind of add a different sort of level to it, like a different kind of inclusion in the film, if that makes sense. This film was also self-financed by Chuck. He believed in this film enough to really kind of go for it, and and he and RJ he and Rick they worked on films after the fact. That they did some other stuff, did some sex comedies and other stuff. But I think this is the one where it really kind of shows how strong of a writer Rick is, and how strong of a writer-director Chuck is. Chuck was also gay as well. And I think in part his love for these characters and his love for these women really shines through. Kind of what I'm talking about before is that it's not just exclusively like, I want to see these characters kind of roughed up. It's more kind of like, I have so much faith and confidence in these people that I think they can deliver these performances. And as well as the ending, it really kind of brings it all full circle in the final line in the film before it says the end. Or I don't know if it said the end or cuts the credits, but it ties it up like a bow on a present. It's just, when I think of the strongest films to come out of the golden age of porn, there's no doubt in my mind this is on that list. I mean, it really kind of shows when you have these filmmakers. I mean, even like Gerard Damiano, the films he was going on to do, like even more so like The Devil and Miss Jones, like Memories Within Miss Aggie, and just these great films, and Bob Chin as well, doing these great films. And I think Phil Prince was doing a lot of really, really cool stuff. When video came in and it no longer became about the quality of the film, but the quality of the box, and video taking over the theatrical market in that way, it's sort of like, it's an art form that's completely lost. That's why, I mean, I'm not as interested as the industry after the golden age. I'm not interested in the video era, and there are a lot of people that are, and I totally get that, and that's cool. I'm not familiar with a lot of those actors. I'm not familiar with a lot of those films. To me, this feels closer to a great drama that happens to have hardcore sex in it than an adult film that has a good story in it. And I think that's why this film kind of stands above, one of the reasons why this film stands above so many others of this time, and is why you can see the love and care that this release has, which will lead me into the release itself. So I talked about the packaging, and I talked about the booklet as well, but as for the features on this, we actually have quite a bit. So we have a new 2K restoration from multiple 35mm prints, and it looks and sounds great. We have alternate soft scenes, and they do that. They show that a little bit as well in one of the interviews with Rick Marx, where they show side by side the differences. We have the X-rated trailer, the softcore trailer, and the R-rated trailer. We have a feature-length commentary with Veronica Hart and Kelly Nichols, which I mentioned before. We have Revisiting Roommates, an archival interview with Veronica Hart and Kelly Nichols from 2010. And I should also say, I know this previously had a DVD from DistroPix, but I don't think there were any features on that. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure may have been a bare bones release. Because I was wondering where this interview came from, but I'm honestly not sure. So maybe it was on there. I really couldn't tell you. We have an archival Q&A at the Anthology Film Archives with the cast and crew. The Best of Everything, a new video interview with screenwriter Rick Marx. He's a very well-spoken guy. He tells some great stories about the making of the film, about the script. He says he doesn't have many of his scripts left to his films, but this is one that he does have, and it's great to see the side-by-side comparisons of what he and Chuck wrote to what's on screen. Moving in, a new video interview with cinematographer Larry Ravine, who became a director in his own right and made very interesting films. Music videos, let's mention before those songs. We have the Script on Screen featurette, archival image gallery, which are press releases, I think they're like newspaper ads, anything like that. Reversible cover art, the English subtitles, and it's a region-free Blu-ray. I know it's only March, but I can pretty confidently say this is one of the best releases of 2024. A film of this quality deserves a release of this quality, and this is a film that I could easily recommend to people who may not even be into adult films, because the acting, the writing, the drama, the directing, everything about it, it works on such a strong level. This is these actors, these writers, the director, everyone working at their strongest. I love this film so much, and this release has just given this film the attention and respect that it rightfully deserves. And I'm glad that now we are in 2024, we can get releases of films like this that can reach a whole new audience. People who may not have seen this previously, they go, "Oh, what's this film, Roommates? Never even heard of it." And then they watch it, and then they're who's this guy Chuck? Who's this guy Rick? Veronica, Samantha, Kelly, who are these people? And then they, breathes a whole new life into them. And I think we're in such a golden age of home video right now, and such a, we're getting these brilliant restorations, these great releases. I mean, this is just one of the strongest releases of the year, and undoubtedly will be at the end of the year when I do my favorite releases. This will be up there. Roommates, I cannot say enough kind things about this film. I love this film so much, and if you were at all on the fence on it, take my word, I don't think you'll regret it. So that was episode 3 of Peephole Pictures. Thank you so much for listening. I already got a couple ideas for the next episodes. That'll be out sometime soon. If you have any comments, criticism, feedback, good or bad, I'm all ears. Leave comments down below. Let me know what you thought of the film itself. You like or dislike it, any of that good stuff. It's great to communicate. So that's all I got. Thank you guys so much for listening.